Hi, Dylan.
Just leave it, please.
Hello, hello.
Declan.
All right, I'm gonna start sharing my screen just so that I got everything presenting the way that we want. We'll problem solve before too many folks log in and see how we go. Thanks for being so prompt ahead of time. And then let me see if I can do the presenter view. All right, so you don't see my notes there, do you? Like you see just the screen? Okay, great. Wonderful. Yeah, that's no problem. Cameras and mics off is totally fine. There isn't a lot of interaction required until the very end if you have questions. Certainly you can put questions in the chat and I will do my best to answer them and we'll come to them as they go. Or you can always raise your hand as a function and I can call on you. I will also be sharing the slides with you all. And I am going to plunk in a couple of links into the chat throughout. So if it's possible for you folks from Tyee at the program director level to maybe capture some of those links and reshare them in an email format to anybody who's not attending. If we need to, we can go through the links later too. No stress on that. There's just a few opportunities for you to check them out. So we still have another minute or so before our actual start time, but I'm really encouraged to see how many folks are joining in right now. I'll start off just by introducing myself. My name is Laura Patrick, and I'm the founder and owner of Kids Physio Group. And I'm from home today calling in as well, so hopefully I don't have too many distractions in my home office, but like you, I'm really excited to dive deeper into concussion, and for many of you it's going to be a refresher, but I'm really looking forward to presenting to this very engaged group of folks, so thank you very much for having me. Just wait right till the 6:30 mark on my clock, and then we are going to get started.
She can right now.
Okay.
Say something. Say something.
Trying to see who I can hear. Love it. Okay, got lots of people here, so I am going to get started. So welcome to the Grouse Tyee Ski Club Concussion Information Night. Now, we did share this link a little more broadly with a few other folks because there are some other associations within North Vancouver that are also prioritizing concussion. And so you may see a few names, actually, Tyee, that you don't recognize, and that might be that they are flicka gymnasts, or they are absolute cheerleaders, or they are from North Vancouver minor hockey. So kudos to all of those associations in North Vancouver who are prioritizing concussion education. But I have specifically geared this information night to the skiers here and snowboarders, and we'll most certainly be able to answer your questions from that perspective. So who is Kids Physio Group? Who am I? My name is Laura. I'm the founder and owner of Kids Physio Group. I'm the franchisor as well of 18 locations across Canada, but we are a local company. I am North Vancouver born and raised, and I'm really proud to own now coming up to 3 clinics myself. I started the company in East Vancouver, and we have grown to our Dollarton location just celebrated 10 years on Friday. So we've been supporting this community for a long time. And our Lonsdale location is going to open in early 2025. Like, I'm really hoping by the time you guys are on the snow and firmly on the snow, you'll have a much closer location, and we'll be at 13th and Lonsdale right near the hospital. Our history with Tyee goes back all the way to 2016, maybe even a little sooner. But Tyee has invited us to discuss concussions for many years, and we have worked hard to support your athletes. Anybody who's become injured, anybody who has a concussion, and certainly we've been doing baseline testing with Tyee for a long time now. We've also been working with North Van Minor Hockey Association this year, where they have adopted a new process map. And I went ahead and branded this for Tyee as well. So if you head over to North Vancouver Minor on their website, or if any of your kids also play hockey, you're going to be familiar with this process map. And today what I'm doing is I'm going to speak to the various different steps that help to break down the education, the technology, the baseline testing, and the spreading of protective culture when it comes to concussions in Tyee, in this association, as well as now a few other associations. So I'm looking forward to discussing it. Complete Concussion Management is our partner. They're the ones who actually give us all of this information. They are a concussion research company. They're Canadian based, but they are international as well. So they are leaders in concussion education, and they educate healthcare practitioners on cutting-edge concussion therapies and management strategies. But they recognize also the importance of education to different associations and sports groups. They provide us as practitioners the most current and up-to-date and consistent protocols for assessment, rehabilitation, and recovery of concussion. And one of the reasons that we decided to partner with these guys and become CCMI certified as practitioners is that the concussion world and research changes very rapidly. Us as a small business, even though we have many locations, it would be near impossible to keep up with the level of information that's coming out about how to properly train and treat concussion. So we rely very heavily on CCMI to continue to update us. So you can be really confident that the physiotherapist that you see at Kids Physio Group, who is trained in treating concussions, will have the most up-to-date research available. So step one is education. I'm going to do a refresher today on concussions, but I'm also going to strongly encourage you to take the CCMI sideline course. And we have a free code to take this course. It's an excellent course. It's going to go through what I'm plunking it in the chat here for you. It's going to go through many things that I go through tonight, but in a little bit more detail. And it's also going to give you a certificate at the end for being CCMI sideline trained. It's going to mean that you're speaking the same language as the physiotherapists at Kids Physio Group or somebody else who is CCMI certified. So I highly encourage you to do that as well. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour to do, but it's a wonderful opportunity for a course there. So what is a concussion? The truth is anyone can get a concussion, but involvement in sport is absolutely going to increase your risk of concussion. However, at Kids Physio Group, we see injuries that happen on the playground, typical playground play as well. So the younger athletes are a little more susceptible just given the fact that their brains are not fully developed, making them a bit more vulnerable to injury. But as you can imagine too, because kids' heads are quite large, they're actually by age 4, their head is 90% of its full size and their bodies are only about 19%. So you add a helmet on top of that and they're a little bobblehead. But the winter sports that are highest risk, you guys know them, are listed below here. And that's because of the speeds at which people are doing these sports, as well as the opportunity for collision. So true or false, you can plug it in the chat if you're engaged here right now. You don't need to hit your head in order to sustain a concussion. I'll wait for at least one person to plunk something in the chat before I get it.
No, here, you put it here.
Or yell out, I love it. True or false? Someone yell out true, you're absolutely right. You do not need to hit your head. The myth is that we're busting tonight is that concussions only happen when you hit your head, and that is not true. Concussions are a result of acceleration and deceleration in the brain. And that's because we have two different matters. We have a gray matter and a white matter. They're different densities. When you accelerate or decelerate, so you slow down rapidly or accelerate rapidly, you have this stretching and shearing of brain cells because those matters are of different densities. So we have two phases of concussion. First, the excitation phase, which is those initial seconds or even up to a few minutes. You might, I don't know if you're a football fan, but you might have seen even more recently, there was a collision that happened with one of the football players, and he immediately had a very visual excitation phase. And that can look like a fencing response or hands that are kind of curled up. Now, you might not see that because your athletes are wearing gloves, but if you notice any of these sort of like funny postures, that is the true excitation phase of a concussion. And it lasts only minutes or sometimes even seconds. The second phase is called spreading depression, and that's the energy deficit that happens after a concussion. So what does it feel like? I've listed a bunch of the symptoms here of what it feels like. And please note that it does not necessarily result in a loss of consciousness. In fact, 90% of concussions do not result in a loss of consciousness. But you may feel some of these other things, or the athlete might feel some of these things. What does it feel like? We've actually listed, this was the same example that we used last year of an experience of a snowboarder who hit a slick gully, gained some air, very quickly lost air, and then landed. And so they initially felt very dazed after wiping out. Slowly processing what happened, caught their breath after a few minutes, felt fine and finished the run. That's very normal because that's the after the excitation phase, then there's this plateau, and I'm going to show you on a graph in a minute. Some people can start to feel fine after those first few seconds, but then they move into the spreading depression phase, and that's where people start to feel, and this person, by the time they got down to the chairlift, felt tired, irritable, headache, sensitive to light, don't feel right, feeling slowed down, low energy. And that's the symptoms that can come in those hours and days after concussion. So when in doubt, sit them out. You can understand that if you have an athlete who's come off and they immediately, you've seen, okay, they've had an initial symptom of confusion or something like this, or very dizzy, not feeling well, and then they're like, oh, actually, I feel okay. It's so important to just sit them out. We want to wait until they actually get into the spreading depression phase if they have had a concussion. So you need to honor that time period, that there is this sort of trick that concussions kind of play on us, that we can feel a little bit better before you actually start to feel worse. And that's the worst thing you can do, is now go back into a play environment where you could then sustain another head injury, especially if you're off your game because you're not feeling well and you've just sustained a concussion. So how do we recognize concussion? Since the last time we talked, there's a new SCAT. So this is the sideline assessment tool. There's the SCAT-6, and then there's the child SCAT-6. And then complete concussion management, we're going to get into technology here in a minute, but I've just posted the app here for you to see. The SCAT-6 and the child SCAT-6 are now embedded within the concussion tracker app. And I'm going to give you the link to download that. But I'm just showing you here that there is a trainer's manual that then goes into what are the signs and symptoms right after a concussion. It's going to show you on your phone what happens on ice, on snow, on field. What should I be asking the athlete? That's right on your device. And then lastly, when I pull them off, so they use the example of the bench. So this would be for hockey, for example. What am I looking for on the bench? But for your skiers, what are you looking for when you actually pull them to the side of the snow or maybe on the chairlift? This is now what you're going to be looking for. And all of that is available in your pocket on your phone. And we're all carrying our phones even when we're skiing now. So this is extremely helpful. You don't need to have a second piece of paper with you with the SCAT in order to be able to get some of these initial questions asked to the athlete to start recognizing, okay, has this athlete received a concussion? Here's the graph that I wanted to talk to you about. So we've got energy on this axis and time on this axis. This is the concussion. This is the minutes to hours, and then the athlete could start to feel better. That's the plateau I'm talking about. Then over time, over the course of the next 5 to 7 days, we see a huge drop in energy, followed by a period of time. And right now we're talking about 22 to 45 days. That's what's in the literature still right now, where you start to climb back up to full energy in the brain again. And this is usually the time where we start to feel better after 5 to 7 days. That's where the symptoms start to resolve. But the energy deficits, or the ATP, what we're seeing in studies is that that doesn't actually resolve until much later. An extra 2 weeks often is when your brain is actually fully recovered. So symptoms might be gone, but your brain isn't fully recovered. So what should you do if you should suspect a concussion? I've talked about this before. Sit them out. We monitor them. The sideline course goes into very specific details. This is great education for you guys if you want to know exactly what to be looking for. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but the big one is not allowing the athlete to sleep for the first 3 hours. We want to keep them up, make sure that they're good. We're looking for worsening symptoms. And then overnight, you don't need to wake up the athlete, but guidelines are suggesting that you check on them 1 to 2 hours, obviously for breathing. And then if there's any concerns and escalating into red flags. All of this information, as I say, is going to be on the app. CCMI has a really nice flow chart also, but I do believe that this is all digitized now. So you're going to be looking for this. If you suspect a concussion, you open up your phone, go to the app, and you can actually click here and look through this. So it's not something that you need to necessarily memorize, but great information to know what you're actually looking for if you see one of those big collisions or wipeouts. Red flags, these are things that they should be taken to the hospital for. We're looking for vomiting is a big one, 2 black eyes, fluid leaking from the ears, decreasing consciousness, bruising behind the ears, double vision, weakness, and then the severe or worsening headache. These really big ones of this like very deep confusion of what's going on is also a reason to get checked out in one of the ERs. So resolution of symptoms does not equal recovery. That's what we've just talked about. So even though you're feeling better, it doesn't mean that your brain is recovered. So I'm going to show this graph one more time. So the initial injury, we've got the plateau. Here's the energy deficit of 5 to 7 days, climbing back up in those 2 weeks. So what does it mean? At the initial injury, the energy levels fluctuate. From the point of injury to the 5 to 7 day mark, we lose energy. And then from day 7 to 45, our brain is beginning to recover. Symptom free, usually if your symptoms are free, this is a quick quiz. I think you know the answer. If your symptoms are free after 1 week, are you considered ready to return to play? No, you are not. So after 7 days of decreasing symptoms, we're in the most vulnerable stage. And this is the risk that we fall into of a second concussion in this period of time is only going to take the athlete out for longer. So this time frame will be a lot longer and the energy deficit will be a lot longer. So their symptoms could be more prominent as well during that time. I've already actually talked about this, but with the assessment tools, we often see deficits in visual balance and vestibular testing, even when day-to-day there are no symptoms. So this is a good example of when you come in for an initial assessment, even though you might be feeling a little bit better, we're going to do some of those visual scanning and the balance testing and stuff that will pick up on some of those residual challenges within the brain, even though there's no more symptoms necessarily. So we can pick up on those in terms of clinical findings within the athlete. Second impact syndrome. This is a major issue with concussion. So sustaining that second hit while the brain is still in an energy deficit causes the brain to go into further deficit. There are some examples, it's still rare, but there are some examples that can be fatal or lead to severe disability if an athlete has second and third concussions before they have fully recovered from the first one. So concussion management is more about helping the athlete concussion management is about helping the athlete feel better, but more importantly, ensuring that they're not at risk of that second syndrome. So here's the graph again. This shows the second impact of the timeline and then the third impact. And we're just not really sure what happens here if you get that third impact. We often see athletes be completely removed from the sport if they have a third impact before they've fully recovered. And they may not come back that calendar year, and they may not even come back. I have an example of a really wonderful hockey player who is only 16 years old and unfortunately did not have great concussion management, and he's not playing hockey any longer. So it's one of those sort of disappointing factors that if we can prevent this urgency of getting athletes back to sport too soon, then we can hopefully see kids stay in their sport for longer. And so what you can see is even after this second concussion, while it's taking longer, if they get fully recovered and they have another concussion here, what we tend to see is that it shouldn't impact the length of time on that second concussion if they've fully recovered from the first one. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about technology. This is relatively new now for CCMI. Their app has improved significantly. So I'm going to play a really quick video just to show you, it's 1 minute long, what the Concussion Tracker app is. And then I'm going to send you also a link in the chat for downloading this app. It's a direct link to their website, but depending on what kind of device you have, this is where you're going to download the app. Okay, so highly suggested, especially if you're coming in for a baseline test, you're going to have to download this app anyway because we need it for your baseline in clinic. But I'm going to talk about the various different functions of the app. The sideline course goes into more detail. But downloading this app is, if anything, you as a parent, a coach, know what to do immediately following concussion. This will empower you to be able to go into the app and just find the trainer guideline, and that trainer guideline will just give you, okay, what do I do? Go through this. What do I do? Go through this. Here's what happened. Go through this. And if an athlete does have a baseline and is already in the system, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like for you as a coach or as an organization to have your athletes as part of a roster So this basically shows various different athletes on your roster. So I don't know how Tyee does that, but it's something that we can certainly support you with. But if you had a coach that had a certain number of athletes underneath them and they were generally following that group, then you could have all of your athletes underneath the app there. So if one of your athletes you thought sustained a concussion on the snow, then you would be able to click on it and report a suspected concussion. That's going to take you to the SCAT-6 if they are under the age of 13. It's going to take you to the child SCAT-6, and you'll be able to go through what would be a typical sideline assessment for an athlete. Then it's going to send them and their parent, and if they did their baseline test with Kids Physio, we all get notified. And then hopefully we can fast track getting the athlete in for the right support following concussion. But most importantly, you guys feel empowered to know what to do. So step 3 is baseline testing. We have a few different options for baseline testing now, but I'm going to talk specifically about what baseline testing is. So it's not always or usually used for diagnosis, although it's starting to become used a little bit more, especially as athletes are getting tested within the app itself. But baseline testing is a series of physical and cognitive tests that provide a pre-injury overview of healthy brain function. So it's sort of a snapshot of your child's brain at this point in time that you baseline test them. When you come in, we do a comprehensive baseline test. I'm going to go into more detail about that, but the idea is that it would include reaction time, potentially grip strength, balance testing, memory, eye tracking, and more. And this is objective data that compares you to yourself, so the athlete to themselves. And this is because we don't have great normative data for this kind of thing. Complete Concussion Management, or CCMI, is building databases of data, but the best part about regular baseline testing on yourself is that you're building your own normative data for you. And this happens over time. So if you even start with an athlete who's 8 years old and you start baseline testing them regularly, they're building normative data for themselves over time. And you can even do this all the way through into adulthood. It gives us the confidence to safely allow return to play, because at the end of the day, or at the end of the rehab, what we want to know is that the athlete is back to their baseline. And then the physiotherapist feels really confident in making decisions about sending somebody back, because we know that their symptoms may have resolved. Now we know that there are also some of these objective measures of reaction time, eye tracking, balance. Those are all back to normal as well. So then we can send them back and we're not as concerned about that second possibility of impact syndrome. So it's not currently required by Alpine Canada, and parachute guidelines were updated in 2017 to say that baseline testing is not a requirement. However, the Canadian Olympic guidelines released in 2019 certainly favor baseline testing, and there's a whole bunch of other research that has come out that highlights the value of what a baseline does. It takes the decision making out of the athlete's hands or the parent's hands, and really takes the pressure off in returning an athlete too soon, because we're going to send them back when they're back to their baseline. Two options here. We've got the app base. So now on the app, you're going to see two different. You're going to see a postural sway or a balance test that you do by holding the phone actually up to your chest, and you're doing the BESS or the balance testing with your eyes closed, 1 foot in front, 1 foot up. It's actually kind of gamified and it's really fun. You can do this test regularly. So you could have your child do it tonight. You could do it in the next 2 weeks. You could do it again in a month from now. And like I say, the more that you do the balance test, the more normative data you get for your athlete. And then there's also the DANA, or the neurocognitive test. And this is a super important test for the baseline. It's also a little bit gamified, and it's one that is really looking at like executive functioning, reaction time, decision making. And for those of you who think you can cheat on baselines, the DANA test is one of those ones that you can't cheat on. So we call it sandbagging, where athletes will actually try and make their baseline look bad so that if they are concussed, it's a terrible thing. If they are concussed, then they only need to get up to a lower baseline. The nice thing about this information and this data is that they can't cheat on it. Now, the in-clinic and the app-based is more of the comprehensive multimodal. Many of you have already come in for this one, and I recommend this one over the app. Although, if you're just going to do basic, the app is great. It's better than nothing. But if you have the ability to come in and do a clinic-based, we're also going to ask you to do the app functions as well. But this is a multimodal series that includes that memory and attention. We do the King-Devitt test as well as balance and coordination, reaction time, and the neurocognitive testing that's done by a physiotherapist. It's in clinic. And I've put a note here. This option may provide an added layer of safety for some of the high-risk athletes, including those who have a history of concussion, anybody with a learning disability, ADD or ADHD, or has been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and sleep disturbances. And the reason for that is that we do a full medical history with you as well, so that takes it into consideration for the baseline. Generally speaking, after concussion, we end up kind of in a low state. And so anybody who's already operating in a lower state, and I'm talking about some depression or anxiety, or if they have ADHD, we're going to be able to pick up on those things better with the in-clinic. So that's something for you to consider. Baseline testing. So the second option, Tyee has partnered with us over the years and continues to, and we continue to offer the discounted rate. So we've already completed September 22nd. I saw a few of you guys. Wonderful to see you on the weekend come through. We've got Sunday, October 20th open, as well as Sunday, November 3rd. That should be opening if it's not already. And then in addition, we're starting to open up some after school spots just for concussion baseline testing. I'm going to plunk our link here into the chat, and that is the direct link with the discount, the affiliate link. You're choosing the concussion baseline test team rate. Okay. So come on in before your child gets out on the snow. If you're involved in another sport and you're already at a higher risk for some of these other sports, just come in as soon as you can, get your baseline test done. But as I say, get that free baseline test done on the app at the very minimum. You can, you'll receive a receipt for physiotherapy, for physiotherapy assessment for this. So you'll be able to provide us with your insurance information, and we'll run it through your insurance as well, if you have it. Last step is protective culture. So the management of concussion at Kids Physio, our concussion certified therapists help children manage their specific concussion symptoms. So we do visual rehab, we do balance practice, vestibular rehab, gradual increase in physical activity, manual therapy, and more. So coming in and seeing one of the CCMI certified physiotherapists, and Declan and Sam, yes, I will be sending you, and there should be links on there too, but we'll make sure that we're sending out those links as well. We also follow all the CCMI protocols for return to learning and school, as well as return to play. So rest is not best. We used to, back many years ago, sit people in a dark room until their symptoms were gone, but that is not, as we've learned, the best way to recover from concussion. We want to gradually increase activity, and what they're actually saying now, and you can see it here, is the first step is symptom limited activity, but you're going to be starting to move your body. That's all based on symptoms. You can see here we have one track for return to school, which is only a 4-step process. And then we have return to play on the other side. Once you're fully back at school, then we're going to start getting you back to full contact, but you have to be able to go through a full day at school before we're actually going to be doing that Chicago Blackhawk test and get you back on the snow. You'll see at the beginning here, the first 24 to 48 hours is symptom limited activity. And then we're going to start doing the exercise tolerance testing in clinic. And that's sometimes the first time that you come in, is you might actually come in for your initial assessment. And then about 7 days later, we're going to put you on the treadmill and start bringing your heart rate up. And we'll do the Buffalo treadmill test and then start working you through the return to play. And of course, this is all guided by a trained physiotherapist and getting the parents and families involved. This is also where we communicate with the coaches, we'll communicate with your school teacher. There's lots of communication that can happen at this stage. Return to learn. So following concussion, we want to gradually increase the stimulus and cognitive load. Concussion symptoms can make return to school very challenging. Schools are very busy environments, and so noise sensitivity, the lights are often very bright, headache, fatigue, these kinds of things really come up in school. So we want to gradually send kids back to school, and the physiotherapist can talk with you about that. We can collaborate with schools, as I say, in making sure that there's some accommodations that are happening. No PE, for example, making sure there's less of an opportunity for a second collision to happen while on the school playground. And I've already talked about this Buffalo treadmill test. This is first to improve your exercise tolerance, and then the results then guide us from here. So what does it mean for skiers is that we may hold you back from actually getting out onto the snow until you can do 60 minutes of exercise. And when you're getting back onto the snow, then what you might end up doing is not doing any racing, but actually being able to ski for 60 minutes. And that might be the next reason that you can go to the next test, so to speak, that you can then go to the final stage of being able to get back to full racing. So here, sorry, I forgot about this slide. So what is non-contact training? So before we get you back is off-snow sport-specific progressions prior to returning to the snow. So non-contact equals off-snow trainings. This is all done on a case-by-case basis though. Moderate intensity jogging, for example, 30 to 60 minutes at sub-symptom threshold before you have any symptoms at all. And then low intensity free skiing, maximum of 60 minutes on snow time. And then we're really just looking at minimizing the risk of a head injury or head impact. Returning to the snow, you have to be able to continuously ski for 60 minutes on gentle, easy terrain. No jumping, no jarring movements, no bouncing on trampolines, etc. And then 60 minutes of continuous discipline specific training on or off snow. So skiing on moderate, riding, ability appropriate boxes or rails, and then small bouncing on trampoline or bounding drills. And then when we get our back to more difficult training drills is the introduction of on-hill drills, easy gait training, participating in higher intensity running and dryland drills, and then low contact on hill training. And then finally, in that after stage 6, we get back to the contact training. And so that's that gradual increase in intensity and then returning to full competition. So correct management of concussion will get the child or the athlete safely back to the mountain as quickly as possible. There's a bit of a myth that if seeing a physiotherapist, it's going to slow down the treatment and the treatment will last longer, when in fact, the fastest way to get your child back into the game without risk of lasting effects from concussion is to see a physiotherapist with training in concussion. So how can you help? Inform other parents about the information you learned this evening, download that Complete Concussions app, complete the CCMI sideline course for further concussion knowledge, including sideline screening and assessment. And then you can help to change the culture of how concussions are managed. Questions? Yeah, the cost of baseline testing is $145. That's the team rate. If you're not part of one of our affiliate groups, it's $170. Be 45 minutes with a physiotherapist if you're on your own, because we're going to go through a ton of education as well, and then 30 minutes for the team. You betcha. Thanks, Ingrid. Good to see you. And there's no dumb question. Ask away. And kids, if you're listening, do you have any questions? I'm actually better around children. I'm a pediatric physiotherapist, so when I get kids asking me questions, it's better. Awesome. I know you guys love just like a short, concise presentation. So if there isn't, oh, what's the what's new in concussion management, testing, et cetera, in the last 5 to 10 years? That's a really good question. I think the big one that came out, there was just a recent consensus statement that came out of Amsterdam, and it was delayed because of COVID. So they didn't get together as a group for a long period of time, the consensus group. And there was some really nice things that came out that give the clinicians a better sense of when we're diagnosing concussion. I'm not going to go into too much detail around that. Prior to the consensus, it was that you needed one symptom and a mechanism of injury. Now that we have a bit of a process map to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, if you suspect concussion, the best thing you can do is come in and see a physiotherapist. You certainly going in and seeing your family doctor. If your family doctor has training in diagnosing concussion, they're a great resource, but just note that not all physicians have concussion training. It's not a requirement. In fact, it's not a requirement for physiotherapists to have concussion training either. So you really want to be quite discerning when it comes to choosing who you see post-concussion or post-suspected concussion so that you have the right diagnosis that comes out. But when it comes to management, the guided return to play is slightly different. I would say that the stages from 0 to 6, we're holding athletes back a little bit more at stage 4 before they go back into contact training. They do have to pass the Buffalo treadmill test. The Chicago Blackhawk test, which is a real physical exertion test. We're very careful on doing the short version of the Blackhawks versus the elite version of the Blackhawks. The Blackhawk test is meant for really elite athletes, hockey players, these sort of real elite athletes. When it comes to the kids, we're doing the shorter version, but we're still making sure to tax them. And the reason for taxing is as soon as you get the heart rate up, that's when some of these symptoms come up. And we want to make sure that there's no longer symptoms when the heart rate is really going. And then some of the vestibular training is something that we're doing as well, lots of vision training. We find some of the kids are really affected by reading screens, looking at the blackboard or the whiteboard at school. But the one thing actually that we used to say is absolutely no screens in those first few days. That's not necessarily true any longer. We're still very symptom focused. So you can use a device if it's not creating symptoms, but you want to be really cognizant in those first few days. How are my symptoms triggered? What is triggering my symptoms? And if screens are triggering your symptoms, don't look at screens. But then you want to start slowly reintroducing something and noting how much or how quickly your symptoms might come back. Because in the first day, you might not be able to tolerate it at all. But by day 2, day 5, day 7, you might notice that you have a stronger tolerance for that. And that's the whole point, is that we want to make sure that we're presenting the brain with information. And if symptoms come up, we pull back and then we start introducing it again. Is it only at the North Vancouver location? No. So all of our locations have a CCMI certified, at least one CCMI certified clinician. So as I said, not all of our physiotherapists are CCMI certified, and that's only because they don't necessarily have the interest in concussion. We don't expect everybody to have the same level of interest as therapists. So some of them are CCMI certified, some of them aren't. But our Fraser Street location does, Cambie Street does, I believe Surrey and South Surrey do, as well as North Vancouver. And both of our North Vancouver locations, once we open Lonsdale, will have a CCMI certified therapist. And if you can't get a spot with us, try and find another CCMI certified clinic. So we're not the only ones who are CCMI certified. We're certainly leaders in it, and we know what it takes to engage kids. So I will certainly pump our tires for that. But the environment is one that we're really proud of. That being said, if there's other CCMI certified clinics out there, use them. We all have access to the same information too. So if you were baseline tested with us and then you actually are able to get into a clinic that's closer to you, that's not a kids physio clinic, they'll be able to see your baseline test. That's the beauty of the network. Any other questions? I've opened up a few spots for baseline on October the 1st, and then we've got October 20th on the Sunday. But definitely look for more dates to open up. in the coming few days, just as we get back to school and we find out from the various different organizations when their kids are on the ice or when their kids are in competition or something like that. So we're trying to work with every organization that we can. All right, well, that's all the information that I have to share today. I'm going to be providing these slides to your organization, and the links I think somebody has grabbed. If not, I will definitely share those links with them as well, and they can put out an email for your organization. Thank you so much for having me. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this and want to make sure to see your kids stay active and on the snow or in sport for their whole lives. We don't want to see kids drop out of sport because their concussion was mismanaged. So thanks so much for trusting in us. And I hope not to see your kids post-concussion, but please come in for a baseline if you have the capacity and the resources.
Thank you, Laura.
There was one person that raised their hand, and I'm so sorry if I missed you.
No, I was just saying goodbye.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. It was wonderful to see you. And it is Ingrid. It's the Ingrid that I thought it was.
So nice to see you,
How
Laura.
are you?
Good.
Ingrid, you're a physician, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so
but I'm
you're
a
a great-
palliative care doctor, so you don't want me assessing your concussion.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. That's so good. I never, ever want to underestimate a physician. You guys are incredible. But concussions is one of those things that we do have to put a lot of time and attention to our continuing education around. So amazing. Good to see you, Ingrid. Would it be best for me to send it in PDF if any of the Tyee team is still there? I don't think they are. All good. Okay, good to see everybody.